I've come to the ancient city of Exeter, and what a smashing, fantastic place it is. I really like it. Exeter is a very old city, right from when the Romans first came, marched in by Vespasian, who became an emperor. It's got a beautiful city wall that circumnavigates the city, built by the Romans, maintained in the medieval period, and still maintained today.
The wall is in an amazing condition, considering that parts of it are nearly 2,000 years old. Some sections of the wall had curious compartments, such as this, which became a jail to imprison lollards. Many of the surviving sections are 15 foot tall and must have been a very imposing sight to behold.
In the inner wall, you find the magnificent, splendid cathedral. It is absolutely wonderful. And as I came on this February day, I noticed they were giving free tours around the cathedral. Free! This is what's absolutely lovely about Exeter. There's so much help to get you to understand and explore the history, which is one of the reasons I've came.
This splendid building was founded in 1050, although what we see now as a completed landmark was finished around 1400. There have been other buildings attached to it over the years, and it boasts the longest uninterrupted vaulted ceiling in England.
You'll notice that in the podcasts I meet up with Tony Lethbridge, who is a local historian and has written a fantastic, fabulous guidebook to Exeter, simply called Exeter. In my investigations, I've only had 2 days to come here, and I can tell you it isn't long enough. There's just so much to see. There's so much history to absorb. Even though I've read as much as I can of Tony's book, and he's taken me round, there's still more and more. The house that moved, this beautiful 15th century house that is about 3 or 4 stories high, timber framed, that was physically moved down the road.
It's the oldest surviving house in Exeter, and in 1961 it was scheduled to be demolished to make way for a new road. Exeter Council spent £10,000 to have the building physically moved into its new home.
I'm sitting down here by the River Exe, and it's about 9 miles from Exmouth where it comes in. It was a hell of a lot wider in its day. This is just a very small section of it. In fact, if I go that way, we'll come to Gervais's Bridge. Now, this was the first bridge that was built in Exeter. Unfortunately, just when it was about finished, he died.
Crossing the then much wider River Exe was dangerous, but because it was necessary, many carts and those on horseback would attempt to ford it. If the tide was running fast, unsuspected travellers would be swept away. So, at the end of the 12th century, mill owner and merchant Nicholas Gervais built this astonishing multi-arch stone bridge. This may be all that's left now, but during the Middle Ages, houses were actually built along the sides and on top of the bridge, and it remained in use until 1778.
What's very interesting about Exeter is the historic buildings. Now, it's interesting because there's a lot that's missing. A lot of the gates, for example, fabulous gates, really lovely old medieval gates, the North Gate, South Gate, West Gate, Broad Gate, all those sort of gates that were around the city have unfortunately gone. And you see these wonderful old pictures and you just think how brilliant they are, what fabulous masonry, what fabulous architecture, but alas, it has all gone. A lot had survived up until the Second World War. And unfortunately, because Mr. Hitler decided that he was going to take vengeance for some bombing that happened in Germany, he selected, and I think it was 5 cities called the Baedeker Raids. And basically Baedeker is a guidebook to cities with interesting and, of course, ancient buildings. And Hitler decided he was going to get his revenge by bombing these cities, which he did in a rather nasty way. And unfortunately, Exeter was one of those places that got hit rather hard. And you can see as you go round how the architecture changes. You'll have a beautiful medieval timber frame building. You'll have a fabulous red bricked Georgian building or Victorian building. And then suddenly, sandwiched next to that, you'll have a 1950s building. And you'll think, hang on a minute, why is that? And unless you know really the reason, you could be left slightly miffed by the whole thing. And as you look round, it becomes a bit of a detective adventure, and you can work out where the bombs actually dropped. There's probably a map that plans it all, but it's much more fun just to walk round and discover it for yourself.
One of the historic buildings to become victim to the 1942 bombings was the St. Catherine's Chapel and Almshouse, originally constructed in 1457. These were intended to accommodate 13 poor men of good character and preferably with connections to the cathedral. After the Second World War, instead of clearing the site, it was decided to leave the ruins as a reminder of the terrible raids, and I think they're quite beautiful. The River Exe, of course, brought merchant ships to Exeter, and this area on the southeastern corner of the city is the quay. The Romans, who first built the city, actually brought their ships and trade a little further downriver at Topsham, but from the Middle Ages onwards, this area grew to become a very important location for trade, and tall ships came loaded with their goods. Its heyday must surely have been in the 17th and 18th centuries, with consignments coming from all over the world. The architecture of Exeter is grand, splendid and beautiful, and in many ways it just speaks for itself and is a joy to behold.
Well, I have really enjoyed my visit here to Exeter. I wish I had been here a lot longer. I've been blessed by a bit of sunshine to do the photography. I've been blessed by having met Tony Lethbridge, who's informed me a hell of a lot more. And of course, just wandering around when there's not so many tourists here has been absolutely fantastic. If you get the chance, do come along to Exeter. It is a fabulous city, steeped in history. And I tell you, the local beer is pretty good too.